In the past, we have learned about direct variation. You probably don't remember it, like many things this year, but we can review this quickly. Direct variation is the equation y equals kx. It shows a constant increase in x. K is a constant number. It's very similar to slope. So basically, direct variation is a graph that goes through 0, 0 and has a constant slope. Now we're going to learn about inverse variation. The equation for inverse variation is y equals k divided by x. With direct variation, they say y varies directly as x. With inverse variation, they say y varies inversely as x. So this phrase means that equation, just like that phrase means that equation. So basically, on numbers 1 through 8, we need to decide, is this direct variation, inverse variation, or neither, something else? We want to look for, do these equations look like y equals kx, or do the equations look like y equals k divided by x? So number 1, we really need it to be y equals to determine if it looks like direct or indirect. How would I get this to be y equals? Divide both sides by x. So y equals 4.8 divided by x. Does that look like direct or inverse? Inverse. Number 2, we don't want x equals, we want y equals. So how could I get that y by itself? Multiply 1.5 on both sides. Basically, this is y divided by 1.5. You want to undo the division with multiplication. So we have 1.5x equals y. Which does that look like? Y equals k 1.5 times x. How about number 3? That's a problem. Neither of our equations have a plus or a minus, so if you see plus 5, it's not direct, it's not inverse, it's neither. How about number 4? Number 4, I heard someone say inverse, and I would agree. If you wanted to simplify this, 9 divided by 3 is 3. The important thing is the x is on the bottom. If x is on the bottom with a constant number on the top, it is inverse. All right, how about number 5? Divide by 3. 4x. Okay. You could also write this as y equals 4/3 times x. The important thing is x on the top or is x on the bottom? X is on the top. Could you take 4/3 and change it to a decimal? It's like 1.3 repeated. So if this was y equals 1.33x, what relationship is that? Direct. So don't let the fractions confuse you. 4/3 x or 4x over 3, that is still direct because x is on the top. Our next challenge is, if I give you a table of values, how do you determine if these tables of values indicate direct or inverse variation? Basically, we need to figure out, is there a constant? Is there a k? So let's go back up to these equations. If I wanted to get k by itself, how could I get this k away from the x? How could I get the x, move the x to their side? Divide both sides by x. So y divided by x would give us k, which is our constant of variation. So to check a table, we are going to do y divided by x. The equation is y equals kx, but if we're checking in a table, we're going to do y divided by x and see if we get the same constant number every single time. So let's go down here to number 6. I am going to check to see if this is direct variation by doing y divided by x. And let's see if we get the same number every time. So our y value 1 divided by our x value 3. What is 1 divided by 3? 0.3 repeated. Okay. 0.5 divided by 6. Are those the same? No. So this is not direct. If you did y divided by x and got the same number every time, then you have that constant of variation, it's direct variation. Let's do the same thing with inverse. How would we get this k by itself? Multiply x on both sides. So xy would need to equal that constant number. So to check a table, we are going to do x times y to see if that makes a constant number. So in number 6, let's check to see if it's inverse variation. Since it's not direct, let's check if it's inverse. And according to this up here, to check a table to see if it's inverse variation, you do x times y, see if we get a constant number every time. So what is 3 times 1? What is 6 times 0.5? How about 10 times 0.3? How about 12 times 0.25? That means this table shows inverse variation. You could go a step further and say, so we just figured out that that k value is 3, so this equation would be y equals 3 divided by x. You don't have to do that last step, but that kind of helps you to see what that 3, what the role is in the equation. Let's try number 7. First, I'm going to check to see if it's direct. And if you look up above in our notes, to check if it's direct, we do the y values divided by the x values to see if we get a constant number. So y value 12 divided by y value 3. 32 divided by 8. 44 divided by 11. 2 divided by 0.5. So this is definitely direct variation. Our constant is 4. So we could go a step farther and say direct variation looks like y equals kx, and that k value is 4. So the equation is y equals 4x. Okay, on your own, I'd like you to check number 8. Check direct. If it is direct, great. If it's not direct, check inverse. See what you get. So first I tried the y values divided by the x values. These are not the same numbers, so it is not direct. Then I tried doing the x values times the y values. I did not get the same numbers, so it's not inverse. That means that it is neither. Find the constant of variation. Write the equation of inverse variation, then find y when x equals 2. There are 3 parts to this. Part A, find the constant of variation. Part B is the part that people forget to do, and this is where people miss points on a test because they don't read directions and don't actually do everything that they are asked to do. Part C is find the value of y when x equals 2. So for number 9, part A, the first statement, y varies inversely as x. That statement is just telling you, hey, this is inverse variation, so you're using the equation y equals k divided by x. Whoops, sorry. Then they tell you y is 9 when x is 4. They're giving you an x and a y that works in this equation. So put the 9 in place of the y, put the 4 in place of the x. 9 equals k divided by 4. Can you solve that equation? Yeah. Multiply both sides by 4. 9 times 4 is... So, part A, find the constant of variation. We found out that our constant of variation, k, is 36. Part B, this is the part that everybody forgets to do. Write the equation of inverse variation. Y equals 36 divided by x. That's it. That's all. It's super easy. Don't forget to do it. Then part C. Find y when x equals 2. This basically just means plug in 2. What is 36 divided by 2? That's it. That's all. Super easy, right? I want you to try number 10 on your own. Now, a few people notice that in number 10, it's slightly different language. Instead of saying y varies inversely as x, it says x and y vary inversely. They're just saying this is inverse variation, so use the inverse variation formula. Y is 7.5 when x is 4, so you'd do 7.5 times 4, which is 30. So our constant of variation is 30. You could also use the shortcut from the previous page. When we checked for inverse variation, we multiplied the x and the y. What did we just do? We multiplied the x and the y. So the constant is 30. Step B, the important step that everybody forgets, even though it's the easiest step. Y equals 30 divided by x. And then finally in part C, they want us to find y when x is 2, so plug in 2. 30 divided by 2 is 15. Okay, number 11. They're going to try to confuse you using a situation and unit that you are not familiar with. So, bear with me. This is still going to be pretty easy. Ohm's law states that with a constant voltage, the current I flowing through a wire varies inversely as the resistance R of the wire. If the current is 6 amperes, when the resistance is 20 ohms, find the constant of variation, which they're telling us that the constant of variation is going to be the voltage. And write the equation of inverse variation. Now let's break this down into step A, step B, step C. So step A, I see the words varies inversely. I varies inversely with R. I varies inversely with R. Once you get that part correct, you really don't need a whole lot more help. You may want to write down that underneath I, that I is the current, R is the resistance. You could also write down, you see how it says the current is 6 amperes? That's actually, we shorten that to amps. Those of you who are involved in music and like projecting music, you know about amps, right? You've at least heard that term. Resistance, it says, is ohms. So I'm going to write ohms underneath resistance. Anytime I'm doing a problem that has words I don't know, if you can group that together, I is the current, that's amps, R is resistance, that's ohms. That way you know what's going on. So the current is going to be 6 amps when the resistance is 20 ohms. Can you figure out what K is? Yeah, what would we do? Multiply by 20. So K is 120. And they said that's the constant of variation, and they're telling us that's the voltage. So 120 volts. We found the constant of variation. Now they want us to write the equation of inverse variation. So I equals 120 divided by R. Plug in 8, you get 15 amps. What is the voltage? That's the constant, so it's constantly 120 volts.